Hello everyone, we're taking another look. This will be the third and final look at the Mobula6 HDZero. Yeah, it's no longer a Mobula6, it's more Mobula7 than Mobula6 at this point. So essentially, if you've missed any of the other videos, we've been kind of stepping through the Mobula6 HDZero from the initial review, and then I think we did tri-blades that were 65 millimeters because it came with, or not 65 millimeters, 31 millimeter props, because I think it came with bi-blades, if I recall those 3 weeks ago or so ago. Jeez Louise, my tongue. But now we're in a 75 millimeter format, and I've toilet tanked, and you notice that little connector right back there. Yeah, unfortunately, I wanted to keep the original PH20. I wanted to keep this a solderless sort of stepping through whoops and how they perform differently depending upon the changes that you make. But unfortunately, as I got into tuning with this new size and prop, I found that my flight time was, well, it shouldn't do that. When we get on larger props, we should actually increase our flight time, especially because we're going to be running a larger battery. 450 milliamp is my favorite when it comes to 1S indoor flying. But unfortunately, I found that the PH20 connector was deteriorating and my flight time was going through the floor. And we'll cover the two different PH20 connectors and how you might be able to identify which one's better. But the short run is very few whoops, unless you buy from tinywhoop.com, actually come with a really good PH20 connector. Most of them come with the rolled pins, which are really hard to see, but they're generally rolled pins and they break down. They can break down after 40, 50 flights. They can break down after hundreds of flights. The connector, as it goes in and out, it just wears down. Maybe it's a quality of the metals that are used sometimes in those rolled pins one. But anyways, let's take a look at our flight, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the PH20 and any other changes I had to make, which really it's just props in a frame. All right, after not having my throttle at 0 and trying to arm, we are now prepared and we do arm. This flight's going to run 3 minutes and 51 seconds. If you remember back, clear back to when we started this whole progression. And that reminds me, I probably need to go back and add the title or thumbnail to kind of a part 1, part 2, part 3. I probably should have had better organization and thought process going into this. But at any rate, we had a flight time, I think of it as just under 3 minutes in my original review. But of course, at about halfway in that review, I went from kind of a racing style, a more aggressive, a higher throttle style of flight, down into a more proximity, slower, flying in and out of the chairs, but not going nearly as fast, much smaller throttle movements and overall movements on the stick. So this is going to be all pretty much, not all out, but all the same sort of style where we're going fast and we're whizzing about the house. Again, 3 minutes and 51 seconds if my notes and recollection are correct. As far as the retuning I did, I successfully made the tune worse by tinkering with it. I essentially ended up going back to almost the stock Mobula6 tune that it came with. I'm a few points higher on P and D, but outside of that, it's not far from what the Mobula6 came with. And I'll put that on screen so if you want to make this conversion with these particular props, you can use that. But I would say there's probably got to be much better tunes on the market. You know, I don't get terribly fussy about my tune. If that's one thing that you can take away from my videos, is that while a good tune will help the quad fly better, it won't help you be a better pilot. I think your time's better spent enjoying flight and having fun, whether that's on a simulator or flying in real life, than it is to worry about all the little settings and things that you might be able to change to make the quad fly a little better. You know, a lot of those things, unless you're already fairly adept at flying, you're probably not even going to notice little tiny changes. You know, if you've got a problem, if something isn't flying right, like you're getting weird twitches or you're getting some bounce backs, or, you know, even prop wash is a lot of technique when it comes to the flight and the throttle control. So unless you have an actual flight problem, I would say just enjoy your whoops and fly them and have fun. A reasonable tune can be flown very, very well. It just depends upon your experience and your abilities. So I don't tune to the nth degree. Patrick J. Clark is probably the best whoop tuner I'm aware of, and he doesn't cover every possible whoop type or micro type quad out there. He is a master tuner for certain, but I think he's been using Emu Flight a lot. Maybe he's tinkering again with Betaflight 4.3 now that it's officially launched. But so that's my little spiel about tuning and beta flight changes on micros and whoops. If it flies reasonably well, just fly it and enjoy it. Don't worry about every little change that you might be able to make that might make it help fly a little bit better, because unless you're already pretty accomplished, you probably won't notice, and you probably won't be able to take advantage of those little changes. So just have fun. We're just a touch over 3 minutes here. We continue to whiz about doing the hard turns. I've got the throttle position in the top left, as always, and that's there so you can see how much throttle I'm using when flying. And I think you'll find my overall throttle position is much lower in this configuration than it was in the Mobula6, but that's normal. 65 millimeters, 31 millimeter prop, they're just not as efficient, but they are much more traditional. In our first couple of whoops back in the brush days were all this particular size. I don't think we saw 75 millimeter for a while. Here we go. We're going to come in and bring in our landing. It's not all of our flight footage, so hold tight. We're going to do a comparison flight. So 351. My battery's a touch low. I probably went 5 seconds too long on that particular flight. This is a little comparison that I put together. We've got the stock Mobula6 HDZero, excuse me, on the left, and we've got the new configuration that you've already seen. It's actually this flight that you've seen on the right. So that gives you some idea about speed, aggression, so you can gauge the flight performance as well. This is the Mobula7 V3 frame. It's a relatively new frame that came out a couple of months ago now. Hopefully we can't buy the V2 or V1s anymore, because those they were lighter slightly, but they broke a lot. And then we have a frame out that's really made for 2S. It's 75 millimeters, and I believe that is the V4. I might get those numbers. The versions of these frames I always get kind of backwards. I always have to look them up, and I'm not staring at a listing for them right now, but they came out originally as the Ishin trash can, but the battery tray is made for 2S. So it's obviously a much different frame, but it's really durable as well. But I wanted to show you this to give you some idea. Well, not just some idea, so you could do a direct on-screen comparison. I don't know how easy it is to watch when you've got these two dramatically different, sort of flights going around and around and around. I'm following and getting some usable data from them, but I wanted to show it to you because it's really what we're doing is we're stepping through this process of running the 65 millimeter, 31 millimeter props with HDZero inside, and we're putting it all the way up into a 75 millimeter frame with 40 millimeter tri-blades. Originally it started with bi-blades. And you can see there on the left, we've slowed down. We're about halfway through that flight, right around 1 minute and 30 seconds. And now I'm back to the close proximity of much lower throttle input, upper 40s, mid to upper 40s it looks like, and I'm still hitting. Oh, a quad just fell off a shelf. I'm still going around the corners on the right, and sometimes I'm down in the 40s, but a good portion of the time above 50 and even into the 60s on some of those harder at-speed turns. So obviously 75 millimeter with a 40 millimeter props are much more efficient than 30 millimeter, but that does not necessarily solve all problems because, what if you just like the 65 millimeter format? I'm guilty of that. I've got certain quads that I like because, one, they fly well, and two, they're just really small. And I like the mental thought that I'm flying something that's super small, that's out there, in the wild, so to speak, and I'm enjoying its flight. So if you like 65 millimeter, there's nothing wrong with it. I just wanted to step through this. I do have a heavy bias for 75 millimeter. I've converted most of my 65 millimeter whoops into 75 millimeter whoops, whether they're 2S or 1S. So I have to disclose my bias, or I might get called out on it because I'm sure I've said that in other videos. All right, we finished on the left. We see our time stopped there at, 2 minutes and 55 seconds, so we didn't quite reach the full 3 minutes that I talked about in the original review video, and we're slightly over 3 minutes when it comes to our flight on the right. Of course, we know because we've already seen this, it goes to 3 minutes and 51 seconds. Do we really need to watch every last second of the flight on the right? I think we've kind of run through it, and I think it should be abundantly apparent. Like I said a couple of times, 75 millimeter, 40 millimeter props, they're just more efficient. Yes, we are flying a bigger battery, but we are going much harder for a much longer period of time than we were with the 31 millimeter bi-blades and the 65 millimeter frame. Okay, I think we got it covered. Let's go back to the desk and take a look at those PH2Zero connectors. Okay, so I went GNB27, and it's mainly because I have a lot, this isn't even all of them, I have a lot more batteries with the GNB27 or 27 connectors on them. I think BT20 is very, very popular as well. And you can find some really high quality batteries that go BT20, but they're all 300 millimeter or 300 milliamp batteries. We bleed FPV. The nitro connectors from Newbie Drone. Beta FPV has their own batteries, of course, with that own BT20 connector, but I don't like them. I find them to be very underwhelming and underperforming batteries. So Newbie Drone, We Bleed FPV, Tattoo, I think also has some BT20. But you can find, GNB, check your favorite vendors, buy what you like. I had these, I've got these batteries, so that's why when I found that my flight time was going down when it shouldn't be, I knew the connector was breaking down, so I switched over to the GNB27. Okay, I've covered that a couple times. Okay, so typically when you see a crimped on connector like this is one of the poorest PH20 connectors we can have. And unfortunately, our friends over at Newbie Drone, last I knew, they were still using this, but it's a clear colored one. So yeah, unfortunately, in my experience, the rolled pin that are crimped on like this, they are the ones that break down the fastest. Now, whether that's 10 flights, 20 flights, 100 flights, 400 flights, it really varies. It really varies upon everybody's different experience. And I don't have any sort of number that I can give you and say, after 63 flights, you need to swap out your connectors. It might be fine for hundreds of flights before it breaks down. And other people, like I said, it can mean 40 or 50. So this is one that I really don't care for. This is one of the better ones, and you'll find this pretty much only on, well, I shouldn't say only on, because I never know who's out there making whoops and selling them, but I think you probably find these on Tiny Whoops. This particular connector, I'm pretty certain I bought from tinywhoop.com. And so this is solid pin. You can see we've got the individual pins through there, and we've got the individual heat shrink, so it's not shrink wrapped together like this one. So this one's actually pretty good because this is solid pin still, and this isn't crimped on. This is soldered back here. You can't see it, but then they put heat shrink around it. There's also some glue generally right between the wires underneath here. This is actually also pretty good. It's I would say twice as good as this, if not more so, but it's still going to break down over time. GNB27 and BT20 should last far, far longer. But unfortunately, if you've got a bunch of PH20 connector batteries, switching over isn't really viable unless you can afford to either switch over the batteries as well. I don't know how viable that is, depending upon the type of battery, or you replace the battery when you buy new ones, which again is more expense, and you might not be up for that. So it might be easier for you just to go out to tinywhoop.com or newbiedrone.com or wherever you can find these sort of connectors and replace those connectors on your Tiny Whoop. You don't have to go clear to the board and desolder here, so if you're not comfortable with that, you can cut it in the middle, and then when you buy your new connector with the wires already on there, just splice them together with your soldering and then cover them with some heat shrink, just like these wires are there. So you don't necessarily have to get up near the board. Some people get nervous about soldering up here on the board. But, if you're flying PH20, at some point, if you fly it enough, you will need to replace it because it will break down. Okay, I said I would put my PID tune for this up on the screen, so I am doing that here. You'll also notice that, I had to change one other thing for the flight stack purposes here, which was I bought M1.4 10mm screws that I used to make sure my canopy and my screws went all the way down. They're almost poking through, not quite, almost poking through. So I got those from eBay. So you just kind of search for M1.4 10mm, and that's the size of screw that I used. I'm pretty sure it came from China, but that really keeps the canopy and everything and really tight, so you don't have to worry too much about post snapping off, because that's something that I have experienced in my other HDZero Whoop builds, and some of those were 2S, I believe. So you get all the way down through the post, and you probably get a touch of a bite down into where the post attaches to this plastic bit. You can see I also had kind of shaved off the edges of this connector, and that was so that I could toilet tank and get motors through there. That was a tedious task, and you can see my wires, like this one right here, this wire is a little bit taut, so if I had a really bad crash, I might end up tearing that wire out. It just, unfortunately, with this frame, it's not really made for toilet tanking great. You can do it, obviously. Your USB port is exposed here, but you know, if you had connectors, they would be right underneath that battery tray. So you would have to kind of mount your motors and then take this screws. I cannot speak. Take the motor connectors up and then manipulate them into the socket if you were to have the connectors on your flight controller. This one's already soldered, so I was having to fish motors through the bigger gaps and then see if I could get them to mount over here. I made it work. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't a lot of fun because I had to do it 2 or 3 times, but I did get in there, and I do prefer how the roll axis feels with your battery running side to side, which I call toilet tank, but I don't think I made that up. I'm sure someone else did. Outside of the pid tune, the longer screws, then we went ahead and I put some gem fan props. I was actually originally going to use a Z props, but a very good and smart comment came up that a Z props are hard to get in other places of the world, but gem fans are not. So I went with the gem fan props because they're just, you know, they're widely available. The Z props, you know, you can buy them from AliExpress. I've seen them on there, but they're. I did search a week or so ago, and I think I found them, but it didn't come up under like Newbie Drone's name. So I was a little bit concerned that they were kind of not a high quality props, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to use the Z props, was because they're very light and they're high quality prop. But you know, if you're buying from, or you are forced to buy out from AliExpress, I can't really validate that. So, anyways, we went with the gem fan props. But outside of that, no real changes. HDZero still running strong, chugging along. I do know that I think I had outside flights in the other configuration. I didn't this time. With the new sod in the backyard and all the watering going on, it's really hard to get flight time back there. So I thought, you know, it's a whoop. Let's just stick to inside. Hopefully that doesn't disappoint too many of you too much. I had a good time doing this one, though. So if you want to take a Mobula6 HDZero and turn it into a Mobula7 HDZero, I'll put a link down in the video description, or links to the Mobula6 and the frame that I used. Of course, gem fan props, they're 40 millimeter. You can find those just about anywhere. But again, the main changes that I made were the longer screws, which I'll try to find those and link those, or just eBay. I tried to give you all the information so you can find this stuff yourself. You don't have to rely on me linking it down below, but I will do what I can to help you with those links. So Mobula6 HDZero, Mobula7, Mobula7 V3 frame, I think it is, and then the gem fan props and the M1.4 10 millimeter screws that I have on the canopy, the black ones. By the way, if you're a Whoop fan, check out rescow.com. We have universal time trials, prizes, cash, money going on. Compete with yourself, compete inside, compete against everyone across the world. I don't think our top flight pilots are actually doing it. Maybe they're in a class all of their own. You know, guys like Spit and AK and, you know, all those guys that are just mind-bendingly fast. They're designing the tracks for us. So there's something. And of course, you know, I like to help out where I can in the FPV community. So I am a sponsor. So you're going to see or hear more about RayScow from me probably pretty shortly. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions about the Mobula6 HDZero conversion thingy I've done over the last 3 videos, please let me know in the comment section below. RayScow.com. RayScow.com. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.